Welcome to a new season of CUNY Laureates, the show about CUNY graduates who went on to win major awards in their respective fields. On this season, we profile Guggenheim Fellows who've graduated from the City University of New York.
Art, science, humanity. They shape our world. Too often, however, their potential is limited by a lack of resources. Ironically, one solution to this challenge arose out of personal tragedy. After their son died of an illness just before embarking for college, Senator and philanthropist Simon Guggenheim, along with his wife Olga, founded the Guggenheim Fellowships in 1925 to honor his memory, with the goal of supporting artists, scientists, and scholars who push the boundaries of their respective fields.
We all realize that some of the finest minds, some of the most constructive thinkers in the world, have been seriously hampered in turning their natural gifts to the best advantage by the lack of adequate financial backing. I want to do my part to meet this need.
Earning a fellowship is more than just a grant. It is a vote of confidence in the power of imagination, intellect, and originality. Now, in its 100th anniversary year, the program has recognized more than 19,000 individuals, over 200 of which came from CUNY colleges. In this season, as we celebrate a centennial of inspirational gifts, we will learn not only what these fellows have done in the past, but also what they're capable of achieving next. This is the story of CUNY graduates who became Guggenheim Fellows and the many talents they have shared and continue to share with the world. On this episode, we profile 3 Guggenheim Fellows who graduated from the City University of New York. First, John Yao, a graduate of Queens College's Aaron Copland School of Music, makes his intimate life moments louder, fuller, and grander by transforming them into music for a big band. Then, Brooklyn College alum Saul Yurick took inspiration from the distant past to explore the social dilemmas of the present in his novel-turned-cult classic film, The Warriors. Finally, Hunter College graduate Lisa Corinne Davis is an artist who constructs abstract visuals informed by maps and identity.
In 1925, the famous composer Aaron Copland became the first recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship. 100 years later, a graduate of a CUNY school that carries his name received the same honor. This is a story of a CUNY graduate who became a Guggenheim Fellow and his ability to transform even the smallest detail of his life into music for a big band.
Happened was in 5th grade. They had this day where you get to try out all the instruments, like they're all there and you get to try all of them: trumpet, trombone, clarinet, flute, saxophone. And I literally just tried one instrument, the trombone. I was like, that's it, I'm done, I'm good. Like, that was it. My father was born in Guangzhou, China, and he came to the United States. He was a vascular surgeon, doctor, and he met my mom, who was a nurse at the same hospital at the time, and that's how they got together. I was really fortunate to go to a really great high school that had an amazing music and arts program. One of the things that the director did there, he had this huge festival every year and he would bring in all these bands from all over. So like, he had like the Count Basie Orchestra would come play and Duke Ellington and all these amazing bands would come once a year and we get a chance to see them up close. And we did a tour of Europe my last year, so I got to go on the road in a like super cushy way. You know, I had thought I was sort of like better than I really was. And I got to Indiana and quickly realized like, whoa, okay, I need to get my act together. There's like all these players who are my age or just a little bit older, like running circles around me. And my time in Indiana was a lot of me like filling in those fundamentals and playing the trombone and just like musicianship and skills and all those things. I came to New York in 2005, and then it became clear to me that I really wanted to like learn more about writing and composing, and just wanted to like take my playing to the next level. And I had several friends from Indiana who had moved here, and I was like, yeah, this is where I have to be. If I want to do the things I want to do, I need to come here. There's just such a larger volume of players here. There's a certain element of like music for music's sake, you know, especially if it's a creative thing. It's like, I want to be a part of that because of the music. And, you know, if it pays $20, great. If it pays $15, great. Just like, it's all about the music. Like, that's the thing in New York. It's just like music. Queens College was a great experience. I got a chance to work with Michael Mossman and study with Luis Bonilla. They started to give me the opportunity to participate in gigs and things outside of school, especially Luis Bonilla. He really like took me under his wing. He would send me to fill in for him all the time, and he just kind of put me on the map. Around that time is when I kind of caught the bug for writing for large ensemble. He just also opened that door for me too, not only as a player, but also as a composer arranger. That first rehearsal, we got a chance to try out some of those compositions and that I arranged for Luis. I remember vividly feeling like, almost like I was like high. Hair on my arms was standing up like for days. Spending all this time imagining what this stuff is going to sound like. You're trying all these things, and then to have it actually played in front of you, it sort of changed me, I think, from that point on. When you're writing for a quintet, there's a lot more room for improvisation and interaction. You know, the format of it is often very loose. You know, you can kind of audible and make changes and do things, you know, a little more on the fly with it. And when you have 17 people, that's a lot harder to do. You have to find ways to control the chaos. You also have to find something for those people to do. Are they resting? Are they playing? What are they playing? You know, and so there's not as much leeway. It's like you have to answer a lot more questions about how those people are going to contribute to the song. It's like juggling. There's just more balls in the air, and the difference between 5 and 17 is like huge. The dynamic range and the amount of intensity is bigger when you have 17 people. You can get louder and fuller and wider and bigger and grander. And so the range of expression can be a lot bigger. I mean, I think it's Chico Farrell said that, like, you know, at one point the interview asked him, like, what's your instrument? He said, the band's my instrument. It's kind of where the name of the band comes from, the 17-piece instrument, because I believe, okay, all these players, you know, fingers on a keyboard, if you will, they're all specifically, you know, instruments that I'm trying to manipulate. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of these players for almost like 10, 20 years now. So I know they're playing really well. I know what they like to do, and sort of tailor it for those specific players. I mean, it's like, you know, Duke Ellington's like famous for that. It's like writing for the specific players. I get more satisfaction out of seeing the other players play the music and bring it to life than I do from myself playing. When I see other people play the music and bring it to life and the joy that it brings to them, and then different players and like connecting with more people, the ability for me to connect with those people through music on a bigger scale is really important to me, and it's something that I like really enjoy, and it's something that I want to keep doing. This one's called Song for Nolan.
Woo! Where is he?
Nolan? Who's Nolan? Where's Nolan?
There he is. Nolan!
Nolan is like the, you know, I don't know what you call it, like ghost leader of the band, if you will. Silent leader. Well, actually not so silent, yeah. I started writing it in 2020 when he was born and finally finished it in 2024. And I tell students sometimes, like, that's how long it takes. My wife's a cancer survivor, and we went through several processes to try to get pregnant. And after several cycles of IVF, we came away with 3 embryos. The first 2 didn't work, and he was the last one. And he ended up becoming this amazing part of our life now. The 2 of them have been my biggest supporters, and I honestly wouldn't be here without them. Every time I hear those pieces, it takes me back to those moments in time, and that's why the album's called Points in Time. It's just like, it's a means for me to express the things that I'm feeling during those points. It's an escape also, and it's a musical journal, memoir, if you will, in an audio sense. Music has a way of transforming, people in that way. The big band thing is like, I liken it to like carrying this torch. It's like, okay, I can only hold this for so long because the weight is too heavy, and now like, your turn, you take it, you pass it along. It's so hard. And once you get the momentum going, you're like, okay, let me ride this for a while, but it's so taxing on you. You're not gonna make any money. You're gonna lose a lot of money, but you will gain so much more. And even though like there's all these stop signs and all these like red flags, and you're like, no, don't do this. This is a terrible idea. Like, you have to be willing to blow past all those things because you believe so much in what you're trying to do, and you feel like this is something you have to do. It's for the love of doing it.
The year is 401 BC. After a failed campaign to install Cyrus as king of Persia, the Greek mercenaries he hired are now alone. A truce with the Persians has been broken, and their allies have abandoned them. They're stranded deep in enemy territory. Full of these reflections and despondent as they were, but few of them tasted food at evening. Few kindled a fire. Unable to sleep for grief and longing for their native states and parents, their wives and children, whom they thought they should never see again. But a young soldier named Xenophon convinces the others to continue their march home. Better to try and fight, he says, than to surrender to those who have already made false promises of peace. The soldiers set out, followed by enemy forces, in the hot Babylonian sun.
But what do an ancient Greek army, Coney Island, and Brooklyn College all have in common? Well, they all played a key role in the writing of a provocative novel turned cinema cult classic. This is a story of a CUNY graduate who became a Guggenheim Fellow, and the story he wrote about a group of urban warriors.
It's 1954, and Solomon Yurick has yet to sell a novel. To make ends meet, he takes a job as a social investigator at the New York Department of Welfare, where he works with the poorest and most marginalized in the city, including those who were known at the time as juvenile delinquents. But Saul becomes disillusioned with the job, witnessing the failures of bureaucracy firsthand. Furthermore, he struggles to understand why his clients feel so hopeless, since his own experience with poverty was very different. Growing up in the Great Depression, Saul's family also survived on welfare checks. But far from feeling hopeless, Saul's parents, Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, were committed communists who believed strongly in resisting systems of oppression. His own politics, however, could only go so far. After the Hitler-Stalin Pact of 1939 saw the Soviet Union cut a deal with Nazi Germany, Saul broke with his father and enlisted in the U.S. Army. "My feelings as a Jew," he said, "were more important than my feelings as a communist." After the war, Saul attended college at NYU, where he dabbled in science and psychology before settling on literature. Here, he first read Anabasis, the ancient book by Xenophon about the Greeks' escape from Persia in 401 BC. He decided to become a writer, but after working at the Department of Welfare for nearly a decade and having no success in getting any writing published, Saul decided to quit and pursue a master's degree at Brooklyn College. Saul was given permission to write a novel as his thesis project. Informed by his experiences with the absurdity of bureaucracy, Saul's novel, Fertig, tells the story of a man who commits murder to protest a corrupt medical system that caused his child's death. But to no avail. His act of protest is hopelessly distorted by the self-interested lawyers, journalists, and psychoanalysts involved in his case. Rebellion, in the end, is just more food for a chattering establishment. Although he received encouraging notes from publishers, no one was willing to bite. So he moved on to his next novel, a book named The Warriors. The Warriors was to be a retelling of Xenophon's Anabasis, but with teenage gangs in New York City instead of Greek mercenaries in Persia. After an attempt to unify New York street gangs and take over the city goes awry, the protagonists, a small gang called the Dominators, are forced to make their way across hostile territory back to their home turf in Coney Island. In the 1960s, as in most eras, America had an obsession with teenage violence. The seemingly irrational violence of teenage gangs became a source of fear for the public, fueling panicked literature and movies on the subject. But Saul sought to understand the phenomenon better and conducted intensive research for the book. He walked the lengths of the city where his story took place, including a stretch of subway tunnel from 96th Street to 110th Street in Manhattan, and even went so far as to rent a truck from which he could spy on teenage gang members on their own turf. What he found was a culture that mimicked the power structures of society at large. They had their hierarchies, strict codes, infighting, they engaged in rituals, oaths, and intergang diplomacy. In short, they provided the most impoverished and hopeless children of New York with a version of the society and values they were excluded from. In that context, gang violence was, to the participants, entirely rational. Bimbo genuflected in front of Hector, took the cigarette from him, said, "This brother will serve his family till he dies," pinched out the coal, and stuck the sign in the side of his hatband, and also took a drink. As each man said that this brother would serve his family till he died, they felt more and more the fighting spirit uniting them into one, till they could take on anyone. It was this parallel between teenage gangs and their larger society that also reinforced Saul's decision to connect them to the distant past. After all, he wrote in his afterword to the Warriors, were the Greeks really so noble? In 1965, The Warriors was picked up for publication and became Saul Yurick's first novel. Following its success, Saul was finally able to publish Fertig, which was released in 1966, followed quickly by a third novel in 1968, The Bag. With the novels came a resurgent interest in politics. Never having fully abandoned the leftist politics of his parents, Saul began supporting Students for a Democratic Society in their protests against the Vietnam War, and even worked on a socialist version of Monopoly named Class Struggle. Over time, his political advocacy could sometimes supersede his reputation as an author. "Saul Yurick?" an editor once asked sardonically. "Does he really write books? I thought he only signed petitions." But to Saul, writing and advocacy were very much one and the same. My model for fiction is a paraphrase of Marx, that it isn't enough to describe the eternal verities and their variations, but to change what we think about them and to move people to action. In 1972, Saul Yurick received the Guggenheim Fellowship for his work in fiction. 2 more novels followed, as well as a collection of short stories. But it was another medium entirely that would ultimately cement his legacy.
Warrior, come up to play.
After being approached by multiple producers about adapting The Warriors, Saul agreed to sell the rights to a Hollywood studio in the hopes that it might get the now out-of-print book republished. The movie, directed by Walter Hill and released in 1979, took the intensely researched, troubled characters Saul had based on his own experiences and replaced them with comic book-inspired caricatures and over-the-top costumes. The film has since become a cult classic, seeing multiple re-releases, action figures, a video game adaptation, and a concept album by Lin-Manuel Miranda, with a stage version currently planned. But left behind amidst the Hollywood glitz and cult popularity were the real-life teenagers that Saul wrote about. There was no revolution, and certainly no royalties, for the down and out of New York. I looked for my novel on the screen. I found the skeleton of it intact. Its revolutionary content was missing. With the decline of mass movements in the 1980s onwards, Saul became something of a political orphan. He pivoted towards nonfiction and free-form social analysis, much of it going unpublished. And while he never ceased to invigorate and provoke the intellectual circles in which he was a part of, the revolution would have to wait.
Like the expedition of Cyrus in 401 BC, the 1960s and 70s failed to bring a lasting revolution, ending instead with political defeats, divided leadership, and even some bloodshed. But while the people that Saul wrote about weren't able to conquer the system ruling over them, time will tell if they can at least find a way home. Nowadays, we always carry a map with us. But in the not-so-distant past, one had to pore over paper maps to navigate the world. For our next CUNY graduate, who became a Guggenheim Fellow, maps are not only a way to get from point A to point B, but a visual and psychic space where she can explore meaning, identity, and color.
Visually, I was always drawn to old maps, like how beautiful they were, what one chose to put in them and how that manifested in drawing processes, either more or less illustrative or more chart-like. The map is a metaphor for location, trying to locate oneself. I studied Russian and went to the Soviet Union, and you get this map, which you think was factual, and it was all invented to keep people away from certain zones. And so you'd look at like things that looked like an equilateral triangle, and you realize, well, that's a mile, so this should be a mile. Well, no, that was 5 miles. I became interested in these structures that we trust to navigate us and locate us, and that the need to have those systems in place to feel grounded. And so that underlying interest in structure remains in the work to this day. In paintings, I've tried to create things that we trust as like, it's just there. A grid is just there. We don't feel things from a grid, you know. We understand measurement and proportion from a grid. But if I mess with that grid and make it a net, so some things, they're not measured equally, or I stack them where the grid is smaller at the top or bigger at the bottom, all of a sudden the space starts to happen, or a wobble. So I'm trying to take what in painting is unmovable, you know, just measurable, and make it not that. It's a contrarian move. And the same with color. We don't question primary colors. Our signs on the roads are that because we're not supposed to feel something from a yield sign, we're just supposed to yield, right? But if you change that color slightly, then all of a sudden it has associations, psychologies, etc. So I play with those subtle shifts to make the viewer question, like, what am I looking at here? Why do I think I'm looking at that? Why do I feel this way? I want the consciousness of the viewer to be an aware zone, that they are aware they're making these decisions like one does as a person in the world. I guess I put it at second grade because I remember making my first painting, which was pure magic, and there was no turning back. A teacher took us out with some sponges and some paint, made us look at the landscape. The sponges, replicated the impression of leaves. Somehow I put things in perspective, like I had little trees in the back, and I just thought, wow, what I was just looking at just got downloaded to this page. From then on, I was like the art kid in school. It was just so magical to me that that could happen, that you could depict something that you were looking at in a simple way. I did, I think, what most art students do. I tried to figure out how to paint. I was really trying to figure out myself. And that space that I'm figuring out is a felt space. It's not a literal space, it's psychological. So I think abstraction is the best place to talk about, the visceral and not the factual or actual. I worked for artists. I worked for Jennifer Bartlett, the artist, and Elizabeth Murray, and Jack Tworkov one summer in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Learned a lot from being in their studios and watching different ways that they set up their studios, organize their days. Then I started applying for college teaching jobs. I've been a Hunter since 2002. I've always been impressed with Hunter College. I've always thought the faculty, the combination of students there, from someone that's truly could go to one of these elite universities but doesn't for some reason, and a recent immigrant. And that station is this kind of constantly moving, shifting zone of that population of the college and the Upper East Side. It's this real collision of worlds which coexist. It's never still. The motivation behind the works was to try to create that kind of stimulating movement, a little bit of stop, a little bit of go in the flow of the works there. I think people get the vibration, the action, the movement of it all. I think that in the world there are things that present themselves as facts, and in painting too, but they're kind of fictions in a sense, meaning that we all don't have the same experience, we all don't have the same lenses on things. There's no fact that crosses all boundaries, all peoples. And this relates to the way I was identified in the world. So, as a light-skinned Black woman, people inevitably at one point would want to say, what are you? I'm like, well, you've known me for 2 years. Like, what more do you need to know, or 5 years, or 10 years, but they wanted the label Black or mixed. Once they had that label, I thought, well, that's making them feel secure. And that feels factual, but it's really empty for meaning. There's lots of Black people, and we're all different. With different backgrounds. So it's a false sense of security of fact. I rebel against being part of any group because I think it flattens the person. Even now, I don't even want to be called an abstract painter because that proposes a certain history, a certain interest, a certain type of person, a certain gender of person in its origins. I try to avoid categorization in every way possible. Just a painter, period. That's it.